future of modern architecture is in the minds of the men who made it. When we tape recorded an informal conversation with architect Ernest Kump in San Francisco, he had this to say.
I believe the great trend in materials of architecture is towards what I call the strength-weight ratio, the lowering of the weight of material with respect to the strength. Well, I think it all ties in with making available better buildings, a higher standard of building for more people. As we see it today out here, industrial buildings have become packaged commodities now with standardized design. And I think that is a great aspect of our economy because it's the only way we can raise, for most people, raise the standard of architecture through the same technique that we use in our food, our clothing, our transportation, and so forth. And I believe that we're going to go a step further than modular parts. I think the building is going to become modular. We're going to, it will not be long before we have standard modular buildings that can be adapted to any space use. Our requirements in building spaces have become standardized by the very social development of this country. For instance, needs of 90% of the people, suits of clothes, dresses, and so forth. The same things happen in architecture. They found 90% of the people want the same space requirements. There's a common denominator that meets a very high percentage. The same in schools, it's the same in hospitals, it's the same in industrial work, it's the same in apartment buildings, it's the same in office buildings. The important thing is how little the difference is. It's going to make the planning possible. Because you can't plan unless you have a basic unit with which you plan. The planning cities will be realized, redesign community, whole communities. Variety within this unit, tremendous variety, no limitation. And yet, a complete order, and the order that you have in the cities of Europe, the vocabulary is the same, but was expressed in many ways, the basic elements, and sense the unity in the towns, which appeals to many people. We have no unity today. And the idea that there can't be variety with unity is entirely wrong. It can't be. There's only chaos without it.
New York's Gordon Bunshaft, partner in charge of design at Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, thought.
In this country, buildings are no longer being built to last 500 years. They're no longer monuments that are built and the interior's purposes change with each generation, such as some of the structures in Paris and London. Today, the economics of our civilization and the increasing requirements of comfort, technical comfort, this change, I think, is going to have a basic effect eventually on the design and theories of architecture. As far as the technical aspects of development, there's no question that we must develop a method of building these buildings precisely, lightly, and quickly. And this, of course, leads to prefabrication. Today, buildings are primarily being built as they were 40 years ago. Just the skins are different. The basics construction is the same. Tons of cement, tons of water, tons of sand, tons of bricks are moved up and down structures. The same all the way they did when they built the Woolworth.
Philip Johnson in New York and Errol Sarnan in Detroit had parallel and pertinent things to say about the great masters of modern architecture.
Three great works. I would pick the three as the Marseille apartments of Le Corbusier, Taliesin west of Wright, and the 860 Lakeshore Drive Towers of Mies van der Rohe. Now, first, the Marseille apartments. Why? Because he carries as far as possible aesthetic experimentation in the modern style. The modern style of architecture is one in which we emphasize the weightlessness, the lightness, the inherent characteristic of Corbusier has carried that much further than anybody else by holding the building up on great expressive hands, almost expressionistic. And then above it he has a reticulation. He's carried his glass back not to keep not to make this eternal flat skin effect that all modern buildings in New York seem to get by trying to keep the outer walls thin for economic reasons. He's pushed them way back 20 feet sometimes to keep the hollow honeycomb-like effect of the entire building. Then, thirdly and most important, he's carried sculptural effects on the roof materials to such a degree that if you were just to consider it large sculpture, it would still count. It does seem to me there's no contradiction between architecture and sculpture. An architect has the perfect right to make sculptural forms out of his needs, as Corbusier does out of his chimneys, to make an expressive unity to bind the whole composition together against the sky.
Corbu gave it form. He is the Bible of the form of modern architecture, and because his books are like the sketches of Leonardo da Vinci, and Gropius rightly refers to him as the Leonardo da Vinci of our time. So this terrific inventiveness that he can almost take any theme and by dramatization and emphasis of that make a whole architecture out of it, and in that way sort of find form more or less in the functional, but don't think of him as one that finds the form alone in the functional, because basically that's in his heart. Buildings like Marseille are, to me, very strong influences. Here for 20 or 30 years, we've made thinner and thinner sticks and so forth, more or less on the basis of Corbu. And then he comes along and makes sort of an elephantine, strong, massive building like that, and complete reversal of the trend. To me personally, the interesting lessons I get from him is every problem has its own solution. And architecture is not just a mold, a formula to be found, but it's sort of a whole way of thinking, and also the plastic form that he brings in relation to geometric form or to the crystalline form are all, fields that we haven't begun to explore yet. Sculpture is fine, but don't ever forget structure. And that's where Mies comes in. So much of Corbu's architecture was really arrived at from the painting, from the Cubist painting world. That in his work, the structural quality of the building is not emphasized and when imitated, often forgotten. But with Mies, who came here late in life, absorbed America during the war years, and then his work bloomed into a great number of buildings. And all with this very, very strong Spartan religious belief in structure. I see it almost a continuation of the Gothic building, Leduc, Verlage, Sullivan, Mies. The principle and the belief that structure is the important thing that influences structures, and that the use of a building can change, but the structure always stays. There are many ways of being influenced by Mies, and many have said that General Motors is the project where I've been most influenced by him. I would say that I've been most influenced by Mies in the MIT auditorium, not by his form, but by his principles. Whether you use concrete or steel, or whether you use a box or a dome, those are details, but the principle of making structure the dominant element in architecture and letting the functional ones fit in and be controlled by the structural ones to a degree, that is a Mies principle.
Mies knows all of it. Knows before he puts a line to paper how it's going to look. But he also knows what's possible. He also knows what you have to admit is going to have to be put in the building before you do it. And then he realizes more than that. He realizes what civilization is here. You can't repeat Marseille. Who is going to be able to build something of the principles of Taliesin West? But everyone can, and mostly does, build apartment houses. And the pattern which he has developed for shaping delicate building is the first. Yes, certainly is first step in this economic problem, architectural problem, since Sullivan, who first used verticality to organize multi-story buildings. It's amusing to realize that the multi-story building is quite a new problem. Sullivan was the first to build it. Richardson only built buildings 5 or 6 stories high that were still blown up one-story houses. The warehouse, Marston Field Warehouse, one-story building. But the Wainwright is a skyscraper. And the Wainwright is of the base, the vertical column, the last almost, and the heavy corner have been out ever since. It is the likely way to shoot the multi-story building. It goes up with vertical emphasis. Mies, of course, does not know this. Seen it before. It's a good accident, but it isn't an accident of the problem that Mies solves is the technique of art. What's and that a basic pattern from which it is a many of the try. Say when I look, I just must have the exposed money to create that wonderful impression of 860. But the more you try to make a building cheap, and the more you try to make it expressive, the more closely to 860 you're going to end up. Taliesin West, of course, quite a different matter. Frank Lloyd Wright belongs to the 880s. There, I think the essence of his house is the human element, the procession through the building. I want to that you make approach the building until you get into what he called code. And the number of turns, I think, was 45. Now, he is playing with you as you walk through that space. He stops your car, as any good architect should, 200 or 300 feet from the entrance. It doesn't rain enough to make any difference. Then you start down a step, up a step, to the left, to the right, down along a very long pergola, and you turn to the right, get out of the you take a few steps down under the magnificent view that you've been concealed. It's been concealed from you for 200-300 feet of walking. Okay. Then you see Arizona stretched out as he meant to. And then you turn into the little tent where Madison stands light as anybody in the world, and he has this tent light that trickles, filters down through into this private room before he opens any flaps. You're just bathed in this canvas light. Then when he opens the flap onto the little secret garden, you say, there are no more surprises. There can't be any more unfolding of spaces. But there are. And you get into this private courtyard with the green grass and the falling water, which I notice has just changed. He now has a series of round circular paths surrounding the seat. And then you finally get into the cove. Just when you're used to Frank Lloyd Wright's 6-foot ceiling, it has a 14-foot ceiling. And the fireplace runs the full length of the building. There are no windows all of a sudden. And no candles. You're entirely enfolded in the middle of this experience. And by the time you get there, you'll realize that you've been handled and twisted much as a symphony will until you get to the crisis. That perhaps is not even architecture in the same sense that the Corbusier building is, but they both have something to tell later architects.
Wright has given us the greatest inspiration about use of space, has also shown us the plastic form of architecture in relation to nature, architecture in relation to the material, to a certain degree to structure, and he has shown us also the dramatization of architecture, which I think is a very important thing. Some tried in their work to be influenced by him directly. I could never do that, and I think that's wrong. His influence on one is and should be much more not through the form itself, but through the philosophy, the principles, and maybe enthusiasm behind his forms. And I think it may well be that 50 years from now we will sort of feel him stronger amongst us than right now. We live too close to him now. That is the way I look at Wright, and I think Wright is the greatest being an architect. Well, I might add one little thing that so much Wright's forms are really quite a different era. And the young architect, the student, is aware of that, so slides right into that, and wrongly so. But boy, don't ever underestimate Wright. Then Wright hasn't really been integrated into architecture yet. And I think that's the wisest statement I've said today. I think Wright's contribution has not yet been integrated into modern architecture.
One clue to where architecture is going is to look in the direction from which it has come. Here, three great architects from Chicago, Boston, and Los Angeles talk about their own past. Mies van der Rohe.
I think if somebody takes his work seriously, even if he is relatively young, he will be influenced by other people. You just cannot help that, and that is just a fact. I was influenced by old buildings. I looked at people built it, I don't know their name and I don't know what it was, mostly very simple buildings. When I was really young, not even 20 years old, I was impressed by the strength of these old buildings, because they didn't even belong to any epoch, But they were there for 1,000 years and still there and still impressive, and nothing could change it, And all the styles, the great styles, passed, but they were still there. Didn't lose anything. They were ignored through certain architectural epochs, but they were still there and still good as they were built. When I worked with Peter Behrens, he had a great sense, great form. That was his main interest. That I certainly understood. I was lucky enough, when I came to the Netherlands, I was confronted with Berlage's work. There was the construction that made the strongest impression. Use of fragrance and the honesty of materials. I never forget this lesson I got here, just by looking at this building. I had a few talks with Bella, but not about art. We never talked about architects together. And I learned a lot from Frank Laclay, I would say that. More as a liberation. I felt much freer by seeing what he did. The way how he put the building in the landscape, and the free way how he uses space and so on.
And Walter Gropius.
Also in my early times, I saw a lot of things of Frank Lloyd Wright, who interested me very much. Of course, in the philosophy of architecture, I am on another limb than he is. He is very strongly an individualist, whereas I am very much in favor of teamwork. I think that the field we have to see today is so large that it's impossible in one hand to have everything. And I dare say that even a genius, if he understands to develop teams around himself and lead these teams, that the spark he can give will come more to the fore and more be used when he has many team helpers in the whole thing than when he is all alone in an ivory tower by himself. My teacher, from whom I learned most, was Peter Behrens. Peter Behrens was the architect of the AEG, that is the big electrical concern in Germany, and he has built some of the factory buildings there and some office buildings, which really showed the new trend in daring constructions and different use of materials. At least it was the beginning of this line.
Richard Neutra.
I don't think, personally, that there's any damage in admitting that I learned something from somebody. That didn't fall out of the blue sky. The persons who influenced me very much were certainly at least 3 or 4 architects who had a great influence on me at a very early age. At the earliest age was Otto Wagner, who was a contemporary of Louis Sullivan. As to his architecture, it is probably the European equivalent of what Frank Lloyd Wright did here, or Sullivan before him. He built all the railway stations of the city railway of Vienna, the subway station. And there was a belt line where it was possible to pay 5 cents and travel the whole day, just never leave as you always go around. I did that. And this was a great instruction in architecture, because I was just looking at these stations from below, and then I was looking also from above. It was a fairly low tuition. These men had a great influence on me, and I decided at that time that I would become an architect. He was a very revolutionary man. He started as a Renaissance architect, or in the style of eclecticism of that age, but he became gradually, and in a most interesting development, a person who completely divorced himself from all stylistic canons. And the next man who played a great role in my life as an architect was Adolf Loos, who was a great admirer of Wagner, but his influence was on me of a very different nature. He never was a great architect in the sense of plan preparation. As a matter of fact, he prided himself not to draw plans. He was thinking that to use work on paper and to use a 4H pencil, as Wagner would do, was just denaturing the task of an architect. As a matter of fact, he slowly brought me around to the idea that architecture was not a paper affair, but it had something to do with human life, and that it was danger to use scales, it was a danger to use pencils, it was a danger to become a paper architect. The man who possibly has given me a great turn in my life was not an architect, but a great scientist, a physiologist, William Wundt, who wrote a book of experimental psychology. He held a professorship at the University of Leipzig. I never met the man. As a student, I spent quite some time browsing without permission in the university library. I was at that time a high school student, and I had really no official admission to that place. But I ran across a big volume which was called Physiological Psychology, and the combination of these 2 words in one title fascinated me. I thought that here must be exactly what I was looking for, because I always was interested about this mind-body problem, which has interested other people before me. I started to read it. I wouldn't say that I understood every single word, but I surely was very much molded by. I think all I have written is very much a derivative of this first impact, these ideas, that to produce an environment, a suitable environment for an organism as a human being, must be an integrated job for mind and body.
Regarding the future of architecture, characteristically thorough Walter Gropius read these thoughtful words on the impact of the machine.
I'm definitely optimistic about the future. I think if we look back to see what has been achieved during the last 30 or 40 years, we find that the artistic gentleman architect who turned out charming Tudor mansions and Renaissance skyscrapers with all modern conveniences has almost vanished. This type of applied archaeology, as I call it, is disappearing fast. Modern architecture is not a few branches of an old tree. It is new growth coming right from the roots. The irrepressible urge of critics to classify contemporary movements which are still in flux by putting each neatly in a coffin with a style label on it has increased the widespread confusion in understanding the dynamic forces of the new movement in architecture and planning. What we looked for was a new approach, not a new style. The attempt to classify and thereby to freeze living architecture and art while it is still in formative stage into a style or ism is more likely to stifle than to stimulate creative activity. We live in a period of reshuffling our entire life. The old society went to pieces under the impact of the machine. The new one is still in the making. The flow of continuous growth, the change in expression in accordance with the changes of our life is what matters in our design work, not the hunt after formalistic style features. And there's no such thing as an international style, unless universal technical achievements in our period which belong to the intellectual equipment of every civilized nation. Steel or concrete skeletons, ribbon windows, slabs, cantilevered, or wings hovering on stills are but impersonal contemporary means, the raw stuff, so to speak, with which regionally different architectural manifestations can be created. The constructive achievements of the Gothic period, its walls, arches, buttresses, and pinnacles, similarly became a common international experience. Yet what a great regional variety of architectural expression has resulted from it in the different countries. What is far more important than the structural economy and its functional emphasis is the intellectual achievement which has made possible a new spatial vision. For whereas the practical side of building is a matter of construction and materials, the very nature of architecture makes it dependent on the mastery of space. Architecture is becoming again an integral part of our life, a thing dynamic, not static. It lives, it changes, it expresses the intangible through the tangible. It brings inert materials to life by relating them to the human being.
Richard Neutra emphasized the importance of man.
Well, I have, of course, no doubt that the most precious of all materials, even including aluminum, which is the human material, which has been recommended as an object of study by many philosophers for the last 10,000 years. On the other hand, while it looks so grey of age, this recommendation, it is extremely green and new if you consider the thousands of papers published in very systematic scientific journals relating the observations and the laboratory work and the experimentation, which distinguishes our time much more than that of Aristotle. So that this is perhaps the most novel development to be considered if we speak of housing life, and after all, architecture always does so. Even if you have a power station in which you are producing millions of kilowatts, but only 5 people are working, the 5 people are the deciding factor how to design that station. Now, I think that therefore this the study of human responses and all the sensorial endowment of the human organism, it is very often in conflict with technical developments which have their own law and their own sequence, sometimes or very often in collision with a lot of other technical developments. The common denominator, the factor which will help us to find principles of regulating all this into a real order is evidently what can human beings take? What is the biologically bearable? What is the biologically wholesome? You never will overcome that. This is absolutely what we don't want to overcome. We want to further. The architect who really designs for a human being has to know a great deal more than just the canons of Vitruvius.
Mies van der Rohe explained his own lifelong quest.
I'm working on architecture as a language. And I think you have to have a grammar in order to have a language. You can use it, for normal purposes, and you speak in prose, If you are good at that, you speak a wonderful prose. And if you are really good, you can be a poet. The same language. Yes, that is the characteristic. And I think that is the same in architecture. You know, you have to construct something. You can make a garage out of it, or you can make a cathedral out of it. The same means, the same structural methods we use for all these things. I cannot tell you at the moment where I read it that architecture belongs to the epoch, and not even to the time, as they say, to a real epoch. That is the essence of the epoch, and that is the only thing we really can express, and what is worth to express. You know. Once I understood that, I would not be for fashion in architecture. I would look for more profound principles. And since I know by reading and studying books that we are under the influence of science and technology, I would ask myself, you know, what can that be, you know? What result comes from this fact, you know? Can we change it or can we not change it? And the answer of this question, you know, gives me the direction which I followed, not what I liked. I throw often things out I like very much. They are dear to my heart. But when I have a better conviction, a better idea, a clearer idea by that, then I follow the clearer idea. And after a while, you know, I find the Washington Bridge most beautiful, the best building in New York. Maybe at the beginning I looked that grew. But first I had to conquer the idea, and later I appreciated it as a beauty. Thomas Aquinas, he says, reason is the first principle of all human work. Now, when you have grasped that once, you know, then you act accordingly. So I would throw everything out, but it's not real. Everything out, but it's not real. Everything out, but it's not real. I don't want to be interested. I want to be good. I don't want to be interested. I want to be good. I don't want to be interested. I want to be good. I don't want to be interested. I want to be good. I don't want to be interested. I want to be good, 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 good.